So to get started, you can either work a magic circle or you can chain 4 and slip stitch in that chain to form a ring. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Slip stitch in that first chain to form a ring. And again, you can use a magic circle if you prefer. And then you'd work all that first round in the magic circle, or in this case in the center of the ring that I just made. So chain 1 to begin, and we're going to work 8 extended single crochet puff stitches inside the magic ring or inside the ring that you made with that chain 4. An extended single crochet puff stitch is worked a little bit differently. So we're going to go ahead and start by inserting our hook into the center of that ring, yarning over and pulling up a loop. Yarn over and pull through for your first extended single crochet. Insert your hook back into that same ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1. So we have 3 loops on our hook. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that ring, yarn over and pull up a nice tall loop, yarn over, insert back into that ring, yarn over, pull up a nice tall loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on my hook and then chain 1 to close that stitch. So I'm going to repeat that until I have a total of 8 puff stitches. So inserting our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull up a nice tall loop, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a nice tall loop, yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook, and chain 1. So to count those loops, let's go ahead. First single crochet, second single crochet, 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, insert, pull up a tall loop, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a tall loop. We're going to have 7 loops on our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Yarn over and pull through all the loops and chain 1. So just continue that until you have 8 puff stitches. So once you have a total of 8 puffs, we're going to slip stitch in that first chain from the beginning. And now we're going to turn. All of our rounds are going to be turned rounds. So now I'm going to chain 1 and I'm going to work another extended single crochet puff in that same space. So same stitch. And then chain 1. Now in that next chain space, I'm going to work another puff, a chain 1, and another puff. So in that next chain, and so we're going to skip over the puff. We're going to come to the other side of that puff stitch, and there's that chain 1 space, and insert your hook into that space and then work your puff. Now, you're working a chain 1 after you've worked your puff in order to close the stitch. But we're going to be working an extra chain 1 because that is going to be our chain 2 corner space in each round. So really you're working a chain 1 and a chain 1, not really a chain 2, if that makes sense. You're working a chain 1 to close and then an extra chain 1 that's going to be your corner space each round. So now we're going to work another puff stitch in that same space. To complete that corner, chain 1 to complete that stitch. So that chain 2 between those 2 puff stitches will be our corner. Now work a puff stitch in that next chain 1 space after that next puff. Chain 1 to complete. Then in this next chain 1, I'm going to work a puff, chain 1, and then another puff. So again, puff stitch, chain 1 to complete, plus a chain 1. Another puff in that same space. Chain 1 to complete, puff in that next chain 1 space. You're going to probably have to pull those puffs apart a little bit to get used to where you're going to be working your puff stitches each round. But once you get used to it, it'll go a lot faster. So then another corner of a puff, chain 1, puff in that next chain space. So chain 1 to complete, plus a chain 1. Puff in the next. Corner. Puff. Chain 1 to complete, plus chain 1, another puff in that same space. Chain 1 to complete. We're back to our beginning. So I'm going to slip stitch join in that first chain 1 from the beginning. And I've completed round 2. And what you're going to have is 4 corner spaces. Those corner spaces are going to have a puff plus an extra chain 1 and then another puff, and then there's going to be a puff stitch between each corner. So you're going to have a total of 12 puff stitches plus 4 chain 2 spaces. So turn for round 3, we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work a extended single crochet puff in that same chain 1 space, just as we did before. And now we're at that chain 2 space, that corner space. We're going to be skipping over that next puff, and we're going to do another corner, a puff stitch, chain 1 to complete, plus a chain 1, making it a chain 2, and then another puff in that same space. And then work a puff in between each puff to the next chain 2 corner space. So in the next chain space, and the next, and now we're at the next corner, which is that chain 2, and I'm going to work a puff, chain 1 plus another chain 1, and a puff, all worked in that same chain space. And we're just going to continue repeating that around a puff stitch in the chain 1s, in the chain 2s, work a corner of a puff, chain 2, and a puff all the way around. So just continue repeating that. So I've worked my last corner. I have one more puff stitch to work after this next puff stitch, and I've reached the end of this round, and I'll be ready to show you the repeat round. So I slip stitch join here and turn, and basically you're working the same round. You're going to chain 1, work a puff stitch in that same space, and then work a puff stitch after each puff stitch until you get to the chain 2 corner space. Work your corner, and here we are at our corner. Work our corner, which is a puff, chain 2, and a puff, and then repeat. Working a puff after each puff until you get to the corner, work your corner, and all the way around. And you're going to continue repeating that round until you reach the size desired. I'm using a light DK 3-weight mandala yarn, which with this to make a baby blanket, I went through round 50 before I started my border. But that's going to depend on the size weight yarn, the size blanket you want, work to the size that you want in your blanket. And then I will be showing you how to work your outside border. So I wanted to show you, if you're having trouble figuring out where you're supposed to put your puff stitch. So I've worked this puff. I did a chain 1 to close my stitch, and then I'm going to be working the next puff stitch. So you can see here when you pull this puff apart, there's this top bar, and then there's this one bar that goes across this way. You're working in that space. In order to find the chain 2 space for your corner, this is my corner. I have a puff, a chain 2, and then another puff. Just pull these apart and you're going to see your chain 2 is right here. So you're going to be working your corner in that chain 2 space. So when you've gotten to the size desired in your blanket and you finish your last round before you move on to your border, you're going to slip stitch join and not turn. We're going to chain 1, and we're going to work half double crochets all the way around the outside edge for our first round of our border. So I'm going to work a half double crochet in that same stitch, and then I'm going to work a half double crochet in every stitch and in every space to the corner. So basically, you're going to be working a half double crochet in the top of your puff stitch and then a half double crochet in the chain 1 all the way to our corner. And so then when we get to our chain 2, which you can see is right here, when we get to that chain 2, we're going to be working 3 half double crochets in that chain 2 space. And that becomes our new corner. and then continue working a half double crochet in the top of every puff and 1 half double crochet in every chain to our next corner. Then on our next corner, again, 3 half double crochets. And continue repeating that all the way around. So when I've gotten to the end of the round, I'm not going to slip stitch join. I'm going to begin working round 2 half double crochets again, but I'm going to be working in the 3rd loop of that half double crochet stitch from that round 1. So you can see my first half double crochet here. These are the top 2 loops that I normally would work in for a half double crochet stitch. If I roll this forward slightly, you can see there's a loop just behind and below those 2 loops. That's the loop I'm going to be working in. So when I'm working this stitch in the round, I don't like that gap that would be created if I don't slip stitch join and work a half double crochet in that first stitch, that 3rd loop. I end up with this little gap, this hole. So what I like to do is basically work a half double crochet decrease. I'm working a half double crochet together basically, but I'm not decreasing my stitch count, because what I do in situations like this is I start it in the same stitch as my last stitch of the round. So I worked my half double crochet, I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the top of that same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, find that 3rd loop back here of that first stitch, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and I've got 5 loops on my hook, yarn over and pull through all 5. That's the only time I will need to do that. Now I will just be able to work around without slip stitch joining, and I won't have to worry about working this decrease to close the gap. So now I can just continue working a half double crochet in each stitch, working in that 3rd loop, and again, those are the top 2 loops of my half double crochet. I'm pulling that forward and working in that 3rd loop right behind those 2 loops. And I'm doing that in every stitch until I get to my corner. And when I get to the corner, remember each corner has 3 half double crochets worked in the same stitch, that chain 2 space. So when I get to the corner, and you might find it easier to place a stitch marker when you work your rounds and placing it in that middle half double crochet. So your corner stitch is going to be the middle half double crochet stitch of that set of 3 half double crochets. So this is my set of 3 half double crochets here. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So my middle half double crochet, I'm going to work 3 half double crochets in that stitch. And now that middle half double crochet of the 3 that I just worked now becomes my corner stitch. So if you want to keep track of that, just place a stitch marker, so that way you always know which one it is. And then continue on working 1 half double crochet stitch in that 3rd loop to your next corner, and just continue repeating that all the way around. So I've worked that half double crochet in that third loop all the way around, and I'm back to that first stitch. And you can see here I do not need to do anything special. I can just continue working a half double crochet without joining all the way through that first stitch, that one where I did that join, and just continue around. I worked a total of 6 rounds for my border. So you would just continue repeating this, working a half double crochet in that third loop in each stitch, and then in each corner half double crochet stitch you'd work 3 half double crochets. And if you place a stitch marker, it makes it really easy to identify that stitch. So I'm working 3 in that marked stitch here, and then you can just move your stitch marker up to that middle half double crochet and just continue that on around. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss a new video. Thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.